Hello, and welcome to this edition of Inside Today's Boardrooms. I'm Lisa Edwards, Executive Chair of the Diligent Institute, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. With me, I have Bob Romanchek, partner at Meridian Compensation Partners. Bob, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Pleased to be here again.
So there's so much going on with the Comp Committee, and today we are not going to talk about the popular topic of SEC disclosures. We've done that in prior episodes. So go to Diligent Institute Insights and filter for executive comp if you'd like to see that. Today we have a fresh topic for you, and we are going to talk about equity. So I understand that the issue of equity share pools has been of particular interest to you lately. So why don't we start with the basics? What are equity share pools and why are they such a prominent issue right now for companies and comp committees?
Right. And so, Lisa, good time of the year right now for calendar year-end companies. The exec comp cycle is over, formally with the filing of the proxy statement. So this is the time to take a step back and consider a number of items. Share pool usage and availability is extraordinarily important. And think about what's happening in the economy right now, and maybe I'll get into that a little bit, but it's the largest pay component for not only your top executives, key middle management, all employees, outside directors. You use shares for compensation purpose for various reasons. Every one of those shares needs to come from a shareholder-proof pool. So they are important, and it goes beyond outside directors. Even your CEO oftentimes has a special discretionary pool for grants for retention, promotion, special performance. All of those shares also need to come from a share pool. And so looking at the dilution levels, how many shares you have left, you don't want to get caught with your share pool so you don't have enough shares to cover at least the upcoming grant because of the timing of shareholder approval requirements. So you don't want to grant contingent shares on approval. So you need to monitor it. And right now, a couple of things are happening that are depressing the value of the share pool. So you're likely to run out much quicker than you otherwise would think.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What are those things? I imagine, this is a little bit easier when everything is status quo and every year the price is inching up a little bit. But right now we're sort of in a unique economic environment. So what is that impact of the macroeconomics on companies and their share pools?
No, you are exactly correct. Think about normal. I'm not sure what normal times are, but with stock price appreciating over time and that type of an economic environment, your share pool maintains its value or even goes up. Thereby, a fixed number of shares can go longer if the price goes up. To grant the same economic value, you need to use fewer shares. However, now with the volatility, think about what's happening, projected recession, increased interest rates, the economy not so good for many organizations. Most companies have depressed share prices right now, means stock as currency, the value has gone down. So your share pool that's fixed is worth less. So it takes you many more shares to grant the same competitive economic value to your employees and executives and outside directors. And so that's one reason why your share pool, a very important reason, is simply not going to go far enough. And I can tell you it's about 20% of public companies go back every year for a new share pool. So it's a quite common event, and you really need to pay attention to this. Matter of fact, you should be managing this way ahead of time, again, so you don't run out or have enough, at least for the upcoming grant. So that's one issue. The second, there's a statutory and proxy advisory firm issue here, another catalyst to think about. In particular, the proxy advisory firms, ISS, has just tightened up its rule. They have a scorecard, and of course, they are not the law. You don't need to talk to them to get approval of the share pool authorization. Yet, it's good to have their yes recommendation to support you. And to get that, they literally have a scorecard with points based on your dilution levels and usage, and even the design of your program, what you will allow, what type of provisions. And they've done a couple of things very recently. One, they've tightened the scorecard. You need more points now to get a passing grade. And it doesn't matter if you're a Russell 3000 or S&P 500, the test is more difficult to pass right now, meaning there's a chance you're going to get less shares available. You're going to have to give up some things to get that yes vote. And the other thing, it does relate to a Dodd-Frank statutory issue, and it's not the disclosure, it's the clawback rules. Little known part of this ISS proposal, and again, they're not the law. You don't need to follow them, but if you need to get more shares, you might want to think about this on the trade-off of plan design. They now want you to not only have clawback in your program, the SEC Dodd-Frank rules are clawbacks pertain to incentive compensation. So performance shares, types of long-term incentives where performance is actually included, where of time-vested vehicles, stock options, restricted stock units typically don't have performance goals. So by law, under Dodd-Frank, those are not covered. However, ISS wants you to cover them. And if you don't, you're going to get less points in their scorecard and thereby have either a smaller number of shares available or even a no vote. So little known, kind of a surprising element there that they're trying to push to have the clawback go further than the actual law provides. So another reason why we're going to be kind of tightened and squeezed with share pool requirements.
Right. The complexity of that starts to get to be a little bit mind-blowing when you start looking into the pay for performance issues. Speaking of pay for performance, maybe chat a little bit about what you see with employee retention, executive suite retention, CEO retention, with the stock values down so far. How are boards and comp committees thinking about that issue as they think about their share pools?
Right. An interesting question and very related. You really have three categories in total of type of long-term incentives you could utilize that are equity-based. You can cross over and add provisions. But very simply, it's stock appreciation, which is stock options and SARs. You only get the future appreciation. There's no performance vehicle. You've got to grant about 3 times as many of stock options to get the same value of the other two full share categories. And so that's number one. Is a stock option going to give you the retention you need? And likewise, it's going to eat up your share pool much quicker. And stock options typically, once granted, although they vest over 3 years, maybe 4, most organizations have those outstanding for 10 years. So technically, the proper way to use a stock option as a recipient is to let it ride for the full 10. And you can imagine if you're making annual grants of stock options every year, that's going to pile on the dilution, and thereby you're going to be able to get less shares. So there may not be retention value in stock options, particularly if your stock is not going up and you're going to burn through your share pool. So if you're going deeper in the organization with stock options, that's something to seriously consider. The movement is to the second category, full value, time vested stock, restricted stock, or really restricted stock units. The market has moved about 90% to RSUs because of important tax issues there with property versus not property. That'll be a different taping to go into. But restricted stock units, that really is the historic retention vehicle, and the prevalence, particularly for lower level grants, has moved almost entirely to RSUs for that reason. And international grants, you could avoid some of the securities registration and accounting issues and tax issues by using RSUs. The market has moved to that as well. So that is where retention is really, and particularly if the market is moving sideways, not going up, you still have value there. That's going to use one share out of your pool. Typically, you've got a 3-year or so vest, so that kind of falls off the dilution after 3 years. And then the third category is performance shares or units, simply just like restricted stock, but you have a goal over a 3-year period. There's upside, you could double the award. So that is a little more dilutive. It's going to use up more shares because of the upside. Yet that category, performance shares and RSUs, are the most typical combination. And you can see those work very well with dilution levels with share usage compared to a stock option. So bottom line here, you really do need to be thinking about your dilution levels going forward, making sure it's a multi-year consideration. You don't want to get caught short. And if your share price is down, there are other things you can think about doing. You could have a equity-based long-term incentive that pays out in cash. Although you're going to get less favorable accounting treatment, you'll use cash instead of shares, but the incentive could be very similar. Or another very little known or used vehicle, stock options. you could use stock appreciation rights that when you exercise, you get cash. But instead of paying out in cash, you can pay out in full value shares. And you could word your shareholder approved program so it's only those shares that are paid out are counted, not every SAR. So there are ways to manage share pool, but this is something you should be taking a step back and looking at. And again, now is a very good time to think about that.
Thank you, Bob, for giving us such great insights. We have been joined today by Bob Romanchek, partner at Meridian Compensation Partners. We'll see you next week for more insights on Inside Today's Boardrooms.